When Florentino Perez took control of Real Madrid in 2000, he promised a new dawn built on superstar signings and global marketing. The Galácticos policy would bring the world's most famous players to the Bernabéu, creating a team of icons that transcended football itself. But for every marquee arrival, someone had to make way. Fernando Redondo, arguably the most elegant midfielder of his generation and the heartbeat of Madrid's recent Champions League triumph, found himself branded as expendable. The man who had perfected the art of deep-lying playmaking was about to learn that in the new Real Madrid, talent alone wasn't enough to guarantee survival. Fernando Carlos Redondo Neri didn't arrive at Real Madrid through the normal channels. Born in 1969 in a middle-class suburb of Buenos Aires, he was already a polished gem when Jorge Valdano brought him from Tenerife in January 1994. This wasn't a raw talent needing development. This was a 24-year-old midfielder who had already proven himself in La Liga under Valdano's guidance. Redondo's journey to Madrid had been carefully orchestrated. At Argentinos Juniors, the same club that produced Diego Maradona, he had been spotted by scout Oscar Refojos at age 11. Even as a child, he stood apart, not through pace or power, but through an almost supernatural football intelligence. Every pass was precise, every movement calculated 2 seconds before everyone else realized what was happening. His European education began at Tenerife under Jorge Solari, then flourished under Valdano. At the Canary Islands, Redondo wasn't just any defensive midfielder. He could excavate space with a flick of movement, glide across the pitch with feminine elegance, yet possessed a winner's temperament. When Valdano accepted the Real Madrid job in 1994, it was only natural that he would bring his midfield conductor with him. The marriage between club and player felt destined. Redondo's style was all about class and sophistication, his talents pristine and almost regal. Diego Simeone had jokingly christened him El Príncipe during a tournament in Saudi Arabia, and the nickname fit perfectly. With his long, straight hair flowing behind him and dressed in all white, Redondo looked more like royalty than a footballer, ruling benignly over La Liga's footballing landscape with an elegance that made the difficult look effortless. Redondo's impact at Real Madrid was immediate and transformative. In his first season under Valdano, Real secured the La Liga title with breathtaking football. Ivan Zamorano and Michael Laudrup were the beneficiaries of Redondo's vision and accuracy from deep, but it was his positional play that truly set him apart. But domestic success wasn't enough. Real Madrid hadn't won the European Cup for 32 years, and that milestone hung heavily around the club's neck. Through various coaching changes, Valdano's departure, Fabio Capello's pragmatic approach, and finally Jupp Heynckes' arrival, Redondo remained the constant the player coaches described as tactically perfect. The 1997-98 Champions League campaign would define Redondo's legacy. In the quarter-final against Borussia Dortmund, the defending champions, he was superb, inspiring a crucial 2-0 first-leg victory. But it was the final against Juventus in Amsterdam where Redondo faced his greatest test. His direct opponent was Zinedine Zidane, alongside Del Piero. In the opening stages, Zidane's brilliance threatened to overwhelm the Argentine, but gradually, Redondo gained control, gently constricting his opponent until there was no air left for Zidane to breathe. As the Frenchman's confidence waned, Real Madrid's determination grew. When Mijatovic scored the winning goal with 67 minutes gone, it was Redondo who had provided the platform. He had controlled the tempo, broken up Juventus attacks, and given his teammates the foundation to express themselves. After 32 years, Real Madrid were European champions again, and their Argentine prince was at the center of it all. 500,000 people poured onto the streets of Madrid that night. For Redondo, it was vindication of his philosophy that football could be art and effectiveness combined. Following their European triumph, Real Madrid endured a turbulent period. Heynckes resigned, José Antonio Camacho lasted less than a month, and Gus Hiddink was gone by February 1999 after publicly criticizing his players. The club was in danger of becoming a basket case. Vicente Del Bosque's appointment as coach brought stability and, more importantly for Redondo, a kindred spirit. Del Bosque was placid and respectful, a former left-footed playmaker who understood the subtleties of the game. He immediately identified Redondo as the key to his rebuilding effort. The 1999-2000 season would become the stuff of legend. After a disappointing domestic campaign that saw defeats to Valencia and Atletico Madrid, Real stumbled through the Champions League group stages, suffering embarrassing defeats to Bayern Munich when they were drawn against reigning champions Manchester United in the quarter-finals. Football history was about to be made at Old Trafford on April 19, 2000. With 52 minutes gone and Real Madrid leading 2-0, Redondo picked up the ball on the left wing. Henningberg closed him down expertly, forcing him toward the touchline with seemingly nowhere to go. What happened next transcended football. It became art. In one fluid motion, Redondo backheeled the ball diagonally through Berg's legs, darted around the stunned defender, and regained possession just before the ball crossed the touchline. He then calmly rolled the ball to Raúl, who tapped in to make it 3-0. The theatre of dreams fell silent. The moment, forever known as Bacchial of Old Trafford, crystallized everything that made Redondo special: his peerless positioning, angelic technique, understated arrogance, and unfathomable courage. The Bacchial at Old Trafford was more than just a moment of individual brilliance. It was the spark that reignited Real Madrid's European ambitions. They overcame Bayern Munich in the semi-finals, the same team that had humiliated them 8-3 on aggregate earlier in the season, setting up a final against Valencia in Paris. On May 24, 2000, in the first ever same-country Champions League final, Redondo delivered a masterclass. Against Valencia's younger, fitter team led by Gaisca Mendieta, the 30-year-old Argentine conducted one of the most lopsided finals in European history. He orchestrated a meticulous destruction of Valencia's midfield, leading Real to a comfortable 3-0 victory with goals from Fernando Morientes, Steve McManaman, and Raul. For his performances throughout the campaign, Redondo was named UEFA Club Footballer of the Year. He was at the pinnacle of his game, having just delivered Real Madrid's 8th European Cup. At 30, he still had several years left at the top level, and his future at the club seemed secure. But as Redondo held that trophy aloft in the Paris night sky, political forces were already in motion that would tear apart his Real Madrid dream within months. The summer of 2000 brought seismic change to Real Madrid. President Lorenzo Sanz, who had overseen 2 Champions League triumphs in 3 years, was facing re-election against a relatively unknown challenger, Florentino Perez. Sanz banked his credibility on his European success, having ended Real's 32-year wait for the trophy. But Perez had a different message. He pointed to the mind-boggling debts that had accumulated and promised something revolutionary. He would sign Luis Figo from Barcelona for a world record fee if elected. When the votes were counted, Perez had won by more than 3,000 votes. Within a week, true to his word, Figo arrived at the Santiago Bernabéu for 62 million euros. The Galácticos era had begun. But there was a problem. Redondo had publicly backed Sanz during the election campaign. In the political world of Real Madrid, such loyalty would not be forgotten or forgiven. Perez's philosophy was seductive but fundamentally different from what had brought Real Madrid success. Why settle for functional players when you could have superstars? Why play tactical football when you could have flair players who would fill stadiums and sell shirts worldwide? The emphasis shifted from collective responsibility to individual brilliance, from tactical intelligence to marketability. For Fernando Redondo, this shift was ominous. Despite being the UEFA Club Footballer of the Year and instrumental in Real's European success, he didn't fit the new model. His game was subtle, cerebral, the kind of football that purists adored but casual fans might overlook. He couldn't sell shirts like Figo or become the face of a global marketing campaign. Following purchases of Claude Makélélé and Flavio Conceição, Perez needed to sell players to address the club's financial situation. Nicolas Anelka was sold to PSG, Christian Karembé went to Middlesbrough, and then, controversially, Perez turned his attention to the midfield engine of the side, Redondo. What happened next remains one of the most controversial episodes in Real Madrid's modern history. Knowing that Redondo had backed his rival and understanding the influence the Argentine wielded in the dressing room, Perez began engineering his sale without the player's knowledge or consent. In northern Italy, Silvio Berlusconi and AC Milan were growing restless. After watching rivals Juventus, Lazio and Roma make major signings, Milan needed a marquee name of their own. When word spread that Perez wanted to cleanse his club of players identified with the Sanz era, Milan director Adriano Galliani was on a plane to Spain. A deal worth £11 million was quickly agreed between the clubs. Now came the difficult part, convincing Redondo to leave the club he considered home. Redondo reluctantly agreed to sign for Milan, but he wouldn't leave quietly. When Real Madrid posted on their website that this transfer has come about as a result of the expressed desire of the player, Redondo was incensed. He immediately released a counter-statement. "I want to give you the facts. Nobody from Real Madrid contacted me to tell me what was happening until Wednesday night. Then I was told that Milan's offer was very interesting for the club and a fee had been agreed. I understood the situation, but it was not my decision to leave. The club wanted me to go and I was in an impossible situation. I refused to allow this stain on my name and image." For a player who had given 6.5 years of his career to Real Madrid and been instrumental in ending their 32-year European drought, the treatment was devastating. Fernando Redondo's move to AC Milan should have been the perfect final chapter. At 30, he still had several good years ahead of him, and Milan's tactical sophistication seemed ideal for his style. The Italian media hailed his arrival as a coup. But football can be devastatingly cruel. Contrary to popular belief, Redondo's career didn't end on his first day at Milan. On his second day as a Milan player, he suffered a minor thigh injury while on a treadmill. But the real catastrophe came 2 weeks later during training at Milanello. While training on rain-softened ground, Redondo planted his right foot into a hole, suffering what initially appeared to be a first-degree sprain of his knee. Incredibly, he completed the training session before seeking help. This seemingly minor incident would effectively end one of football's most elegant careers. As weeks passed with little improvement, surgery was recommended. On October 2, 2000, Redondo's anterior cruciate ligament was reconstructed by Professor Paulo Cherubino, who expected him to return in 6 months. But this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would last years. The rehabilitation was complicated by inflammation of his patella tendon, requiring a second surgery in Madrid in June 2001. A third operation followed in January 2002. Berlusconi was furious about the situation, with rumors circulating that Real Madrid had knowingly sold Milan a broken player. Professor Cherubino dismissed these claims, stating that Redondo's medical tests showed his knee was in perfect condition when he arrived. The injury was simply catastrophic bad luck. After 29 months out of football, Fernando Redondo finally made his Milan debut on December 3, 2002 against Ancona in the Coppa Italia. His Serie A debut came days later against Roma, receiving a standing ovation from 67,000 fans at San Siro as he entered for the final 5 minutes. Football provided one final, poignant moment when Milan were drawn against Real Madrid in the Champions League. On March 12, 2003, at the Santiago Bernabéu, Carlo Ancelotti started Redondo instead of Andrea Pirlo, sensing an opportunity to give him the farewell he had been denied. As the teams walked out, the Madrid crowd stood and chanted his name for several minutes. When Pirlo replaced him in the 79th minute, the applause was rapturous. The Madrid fans unfurled a banner reading, "God returns to paradise." It was the goodbye his contributions had always warranted. Everyone could see that Redondo was no longer the player of old, but Milan offered him a 1-year extension as a gesture of good faith. He was used sparingly, but still won a Coppa Italia, Champions League, and Serie A title during his stay. His last competitive game was on May 16, 2004. The irony of Fernando Redondo's departure from Real Madrid becomes more painful with hindsight. The Galácticos project, for all its marketing success, struggled tactically in its early years. Despite the star-studded lineup, Real Madrid faced challenges in balancing the squad tactically, and there was criticism about the team's style being spectacular but sometimes unbalanced. The problem was precisely what Redondo had provided: tactical balance. With so many attacking superstars, there was no one to do the intelligent defensive work, no one to control tempo and link defense with attack. The very qualities that made Redondo special were exactly what the Galácticos-era Real Madrid was missing. It wasn't until players like Claude Makélélé established himself that Real found the midfield stability Redondo had once provided. The tactical evolution of football has only highlighted how ahead of his time Redondo was. The modern emphasis on intelligent, ball-playing defensive midfielders, players like Sergio Busquets and Andrea Pirlo, all echo qualities that Redondo possessed a decade earlier. His influence on Argentine football was equally significant. Players like Riquelme and Pablo Aimar acknowledged Redondo's influence on their development, and his style became a template for a generation of Argentine playmakers. Perhaps most tellingly, Redondo was recently voted into Real Madrid's greatest foreign 11 by the fans, a belated recognition of what they had lost. The story of Fernando Redondo serves as a cautionary tale about modern football's obsession with marketing over substance, star power over tactical intelligence. His departure from Real Madrid in 2000 represented a philosophical shift that would have consequences for years to come. Real Madrid got their Galácticos, the superstar signings that made headlines and sold shirts worldwide. But in the process, they lost something perhaps more valuable: a player who understood the game at a deeper level, who could make his teammates better, who represented the kind of footballing intelligence that transcends eras. The injury that ended Redondo's career just months after leaving Madrid added a tragic dimension to an already controversial story. We'll never know how different football history might have been if he had stayed, if his body had held up, if the Galácticos project had found room for his subtle genius. What we do know is that Fernando Redondo represents a different kind of football greatness, not the flashy, highlight reel brilliance that dominates social media, but the intelligent artistry that makes the beautiful game truly beautiful. For Real Madrid, Fernando Redondo remains both a triumph and a tragedy, the UEFA Club Footballer of the Year they sacrificed for their Galácticos dream. His legacy lives on, not just in the trophies he won, but in the reminder that true footballing greatness comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most valuable players are the ones you only truly appreciate after they're gone. In the words of one Madrid fan's banner at the Bernabéu, God returns to paradise. Redondo had always belonged there, and perhaps in the memory of those who witnessed his elegance, he never truly left.